Recapping the first Oregon football game of the year, the Ducks are officially 1-0 after a 58-24 win over the Bowling Green Falcons. Joey Mack alongside Rob Moseley, the editor-in-chief of GoDucks.com. And it started out, I think, a little bit slow for the offense, maybe slower than the Ducks would have liked, especially with some drops early on.
Yeah, for sure. A couple dropped passes on balls that Justin Herbert put right on guys, and he was money most of the afternoon. I think I saw a stat that said that he led the country on deep ball accuracy if you account for drops. If you basically give the guy a completion for a drop, he led the country. Anybody who watched the game would have said, what? I saw a few passes that weren't completed, but you do an effective accuracy for quarterbacks, and he was pretty darn good, and he wasn't rewarded for that early. We also saw some issues both sides of the ball just getting personnel. I think at one point the Ducks had to take a timeout to get the right number of guys on the field. Took their first penalty of the year, which I'm sure bothered the heck out of Mario Cristobal, trying to run a guy out onto the field because the defense was short a guy. But both sides were having some issues there. And what was interesting to me is that those were things we saw in preseason camp. I mean, those are things we saw particularly the first couple weeks of preseason camp, and that got ironed out. And so it almost felt like, okay, it's like if you're preparing for a play or a movie, you can rehearse all you want, but you do need a dress rehearsal too to kind of iron out the kinks. And the first few minutes of the first quarter were that. And the good news is they got it ironed out in the first quarter, and then we have this massive momentum change with the fourth down pass from Herbert and the defensive stop that got things rolling. But certainly a dicey few minutes there to open the Mario Cristobal era, the first regular season game under Coach Cristobal in Autzen Stadium.
And oftentimes in these early season games, we do see moments like that. I mean, you talk about Utah, for example, another team that got down 10-0 actually, and then rattled off a bunch of unanswered points. And Coach Cristobal said that the offense really hit its stride after that. You talked about it on GoDucks.com, that key fourth down touchdown. I mean, that really was a momentum-changing play for this game.
Yeah, I asked Justin Herbert after the game, did it feel like there was more than most, more than any other plays in the game? Did it feel like a lot was riding on that play? In hindsight, obviously, that's when everything changed. And I wondered if in that moment he was thinking, okay, we got to make a play right here. And he didn't really, if he thought that, he didn't really betray it. He just said, hey, I knew I had a good receiver at the other end in Jalen Redd. Jalen Redd, who'd had a phenomenal week of practice, as we noted a lot in Quack Minutes if you've been watching those. But it also had a drop earlier in the game. And Herb stuck with him, put an absolute dime on him in the back of the end zone. The defense really rallied back after that. Should note that during the one touchdown drive early on for Bowling Green, Jordan Scott was not in the game, getting a little injury situation addressed, and then he came back and played the rest of the game. So obviously he was okay there, but him missing that series not to go unnoticed. I mean, that as good and productive as Troy Dye is, Jordan Scott might be the most valuable player, certainly the unsung hero of the defense as the space eater in the middle.
He plugs a lot of holes, doesn't he? I mean, I think that's a great point because the defense, I even talked with a few of those guys on the radio postgame show about how, they feel the pressure a little bit with Bowling Green coming at them. And they said, we kind of feed off the offense. And Justin Herbert said that as well, that these two do feed off each other. And I think we saw that in that 37 unanswered point streak.
And credit to the staff. There was one early timeout after Bowling Green's field goal, where the guys were huddled up by positions with their position coach. Then after the touchdown, Keith Hayward, one of the co-defensive coordinators, gets everybody together, draws up a few things. There were some schematic things that were giving the Ducks problems. Mario Cristobal threw more jargon at me than I understood after the game, but I think the essence of it was they were using their tight ends in certain ways in formations in the run game that gave the Ducks some trouble. And then Ugo Amadi said they were using some stuff in empty backfields, and we saw some Oregon linebackers out in pass coverage have some problems. So they got on the whiteboard, addressed that, but more than anything, just I think, relaxed. Yeah. Herbert's touchdown really helped that. And then, the momentum completely got going the other way because the defense was lights out, 37 unanswered points, and pretty much put the game away. Not to suggest there weren't some dicey moments later in the game. Herbert leaves, has to come back. But for all intents and purposes, win number one of the Cristobal era in the regular season was in the books.
We'll talk about Herbert a little bit more in just a second. I'm curious your thoughts on Ugo Amadi's game. I talked to him on the postgame show, and I just said, hey, you're kind of a veteran presence out there. Did you feel that in this game? And he said, yeah, I certainly did. And he made a couple big plays for the Ducks. And he seemed like kind of a calming presence for what is still a very young secondary.
Yeah, he's a guy coaches praise effusively. They just trust him at this point. We've seen him make big plays before in games. And come up with big game-changing, momentum-changing turnovers. And he was a guy delivering big hits. In a game where there were some tackling issues earlier, he was a guy delivering big hits. Those get a defense fired up forcing turnovers. He's just somebody they trust a ton. He does so many things. I mean, he's such a perfect fit for that nickel spot when that nickel back role on defense when they go with 5 defensive backs, because he's down towards the line of scrimmage. He's in the middle of everything. He can blitz off the edge. He can help in run defense. He's stout enough to do that. But he can also, he's got his background as a corner. He can go out and cover somebody, try to make an interception, get a handle on the ball, all that. So yeah, really just a guy they really trust. It's funny because he's a goofball. He's just a free spirit, carefree, joking around, laughing. And you think of stout, stoic leader guys, who are all business, and he's not that. But he's still personality aside, coaches trust him in every facet.
Let's talk a little bit more about Justin Herbert. I mean, you touched on it briefly with some of those drops early on. I think the receivers would tell you a lot of those balls are certainly catchable and ones they would like to catch moving forward. But Justin Herbert finished the game with pretty impressive numbers. 10 of 21, 281 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Half of his completions were touchdowns.
Yeah, also
Rob.
ran for a touchdown. Whew. Yeah, it's an Oregon record for touchdowns in a season opener, touchdown passes. He probably could have had a couple more the way he's putting it on guys. He was a guy too, we talked about over the course of camp, just got more locked in and more locked in. I think his effective accuracy the last week of camp was maybe 90%. I mean, he was putting every ball where it needed to be. I mean, these are NFL caliber throws. We saw the reason that everybody's projecting him as a future guy at the next level. Hopefully that's still a couple years off. I think there's going to be a lot of reasons he'll want to think hard about sticking around for 19 too. But we saw opening the 2018 season all those tools that everybody likes. And we even saw him run for another touchdown. I mean, that's still clearly a facet of this offense. The pistol offense, which obviously if you watch the game, they're not primarily or solely a pistol team, but if you're going to run the pistol offense, which by bringing Jim Mastro in, you committed to do, that's an option offense. Yeah. I mean, you need the quarterback to be a running threat at least a couple times a game to truly maximize the effectiveness of that. And so we saw a couple times when he made a great read and was running free and gobbled up a bunch of yards and then stepped out of bounds. The touchdown play, he had to absorb some contact, but also that that's where maybe that extra weight that he put on this offseason, that extra muscle he put on, helps him absorb that, get to the end zone and keep going.
The other guys carrying the ball, all 6 scholarship running backs touched the ball in this game. A few of them each scored touchdowns. I think we kind of saw the versatility of a lot of those guys. You could see why on that organizational chart the Ducks listed Tony Brooks-James and then situational behind him. You saw a lot of guys carrying the ball.
Well, so the only running back to rush for a touchdown is Cyrus Bilikio. I think we all saw him as the guy who maybe is best suited for the goal line.
Sure.
When the Ducks would do Oklahoma drills in preseason camp, I mean, he was just so hard to tackle. You give him a couple steps and a block, nobody's going to be able to arm tackle that kid, and so no surprise there. He scores that touchdown there, the short rushing touchdown. Taj Griffin, no surprise, he's a guy you get him the ball in space on a little screen pass, and he can make some guys look silly. Some great downfield blocking too. Jake Hansen, Dallas Warmack. Warmack had a couple plays on Taj's screen and on Tony Brooks-James' long screen pass. Warmack and Jalen Redd in that case had really great blocks. Johnny Johnson did a great job too in that regard, but Taj, had to use some moves too, and who do you trust more in open space once he's got the ball in his hands to make a couple guys look silly? Taj can do that. Tony Brooks-James, you're going to count on him as kind of the bell cow later in the road. He didn't have to absorb a whole bunch of contact in this game. We saw C.J. Verdell. Got some things to work out because him and Herbert, it looked like on a couple different exchanges, got tied up a little bit. But he's a redshirt freshman playing in his first game. And man, when he gets the ball in his hands, does he run downhill? He just hits the hole hard. And Travis Dye, same thing. That guy is fearless, just like his brother. So I don't envy, and Darian Felix, I don't even mention his lateral quickness. Again, it's just such an asset. I mean, it's just hard to square up, kind of like Travis is. So I don't envy Cristobal and Arroyo and Mastro. All those guys are everybody's happy right now, but those guys want the football, and it's going to be an intricate juggling act over the course of the season.
Coach Cristobal said that he wants to kind of trim that rotation down a little bit, but of course we'll see with Portland State coming up if that is in fact the case. Rob, I think one thing that Coach Cristobal is very happy with though is 3 penalties for 35 yards. I think that was a real plus, and this is the kind of guy Coach Cristobal is and how focused he is on penalties. When I asked him about that after the game, he said, 3's still 3 too many.
Right, yeah. And, the one early with the substitution issue, You hope that's just sort of a kink that you're ironing out that's not an issue going down later in the season. And that was the only one through the first 3 quarters. So I think he was really happy with that. This is a team, obviously, that was the most penalized team in the country last year. Later on, there's an offensive pass interference that I think, we probably could have gone either way. And then a kick catch interference. You can't do that. But what you didn't see is holding, false start, guys being a little overly aggressive that way. You didn't see, defensive pass interference or holding, unsportsmanlike conduct. Yeah. I mean, the stuff that really dogged the Ducks, not just last year, but the last couple of years, you didn't see. So, for at least one game, I mean, you want to talk about a statistically small sample size. It is just one game. So, I mean, that's something you got to prove over the course of the whole season. But, yeah, how can you not be pleased? It's his job to always be coaching and wanting to get more and wanting to get better. But, if you're just a fan watching, how can you not be pleased and say, yeah, you can definitely see that his emphasis on discipline is paying off.
We talked about how the new redshirt rule has been changing the way that roster management around the country has been going, and we did see 8 true freshmen play in this game.
10 true freshmen.
10 true freshmen play in this game. Your thoughts?
So, some of those guys you might have missed. I know I did. Carson Battles was the short snapper on place kicks. Adrian Jackson got in there late. Brian Addison got there late. But what it was is guys playing key roles. The guys you did notice. Panay Sewell playing and starting at left tackle. First guy to start the opener on the offensive line for Oregon since Lee Gundy in 1997. And holding up really, really well. Javon Holland with a big play on special teams earlier in the game. Sort of backing up, the praise, we and others have been delivering in preseason camp about how much of a playmaker he is. Steve Stevens, first snap of the entire game. He's on the kickoff return team. Another true freshman there. Travis Dye, who we mentioned, just on and on and on. I mean, this is a class that has a huge impact. I mean, there's years where you get to 10, 11, even 12 true freshmen playing over the course of the year. But to have 10 see the field in the very first game just tells you how special this class is. Certainly where this program is at. I mean, there were jobs to be won, spots to be earned by freshmen because it's not exactly like this has been a championship program the last couple years. So, but guys took advantage of that. They recruited talented guys, and then guys got in here and worked hard and won some jobs.
Well, the Ducks win it, 58-24 over Bowling Green. They're 1-0. Portland State is on the horizon, a team that struggled a little bit in their opener, so hopefully the Ducks will be putting up some more points at Autzen Stadium. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff at Autzen Stadium.
Coffee and donuts.
Take on Portland State. Yeah, so O cookies, those were back for people like Rob and myself. O-shaped donuts, right?
Gotta be.
So we'll be looking for that. Again, 58-24 the final. Ducks are 1-0. Portland State on the horizon. An 11 a.m. kickoff Saturday at Autzen Stadium.